What were your guys' thoughts, good, bad, about how we took a published adventure and built a whole endgame run? Did it feel like it fit? Did it not? Would there have been things you would have liked to see different? But anything for like people listening that maybe want to turn this stuff into a larger arc, like what works and what doesn't? What stood out to you in that way?
I mean, I'm going to say the one thing, it's like a lot of times, like, first through 12th is like those first couple books, right? And it's like your big main adventure. But then that whole high level thing became a lot of the end of the hero's journey, where you're this newly empowered high level character and you're going back and completing a story arc, or going to find this incredible magic item, or facing the big bad, obviously, at the end. But it's a good kind of place at like the end of the hero's journey. Now you've gone and you've been transformed by adventuring out through this whole adventure. And now you're this, you can finally do all the things that you wanted to do when you were a lower level character and kind of complete a lot of what you would at the end of your sort of hero's journey. So.
Tony, what do you think with that? How we translate it over, because most of the other stuff we've done, Storm Kings, we kind of ended with the adventure, right? You had ideas for how to push it back, but there's the group didn't continue on, and with Woodstock, it was completely homebrewed from the very beginning. So there is nothing to continue except the story, right?
So plenty of satisfying games don't wrap everything up by the completion of the main arc. Like if you look at like the God of War series, you hit like what is your point, and there's these other threads which are important, but that gives you kind of that leads you into that what else. So I don't necessarily think by not completing that for Fenris it's a failure. It just kind of left something that if we were to come back to these characters, what we could do next.
Yeah.
As far as how it felt to take the published material and move on for it, well, so we did the classic Barovian crawl for 11 levels. So, we went through the low magic. We scraped around the towns. We fought werewolves with silver weapons. We grinded that out. And at that point, I think you did the right thing. You kind of took a step back, kept the theme, and said, guys, what do you want to do now? And that's how the flavor of that game evolved.
What you were saying?
I was just going to say, for a player perspective, if you're not metagaming, then you don't know necessarily where the story arc is supposed to go to versus being more creative and whimsical about where the storyline can be or will end with. So as someone who does more DMing where it's just I'm making stuff up, since I work with more kids than anything, like I don't necessarily follow the book to the T.
Sure.
I use it as more of like a guideline.
Yeah.
So as a player who definitely tries not to metagame, I would never even realize that you made all that up or you created some things. And I know even in the past when Thorin was just making stuff up about something, I was like, whoa, you just made that up? Like I would never have known,
Well, that's one of the drawbacks is obviously if you're playing Curse of Strahd, like if you kill him, the end, right? But yeah, I appreciate that. I want to hear from Beth though, because I want to say this is probably the first published adventure that you've been run through, Beth, because everything else that we played with the family and stuff has all been very homebrew, whether it's Jake's homebrew, mine, Frank's, whatever, right? Right. So having played through, obviously, one of the most classic adventures that was updated for 5e, The Curse of Strahd, and then kind of this final endgame run where your individual stories and where you guys had taken that kind of ballooned out into where it created the path for where the end game stuff with the high level was going to be. What did it feel? Did it feel different between like immersion style or the togetherness of the adventure, or how real the world felt pre and post the published stuff? If that makes sense?
It definitely makes sense. I actually could not tell where it stopped and started. I felt it blended very well together. I'm on Roll20. I missed the maps because I'm a big visual person, So, sure. But other than that, I felt like it went great. Like I couldn't tell, and it makes you wonder I, as a player, was excited because we did get to the levels we got. I mean, no one gets to level 9 spells. Like, when do you get them?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's hard to get, as we've seen, it's hard to get. Even when you're milestone leveling up. Okay, well, now you're 15th, now you're 16th. All right, one session, you're 17th. I got to get you there. Even with that, we were 30-some sessions in, 35, 36, 37 sessions in to complete this out. And I want to get back to some of our other guests here. But for Chris and Tony too, being the players, and Bon as well, that same question, like, if someone is running published adventures and then deciding to homebrew out, like, what did you think worked the best out of that too? Did it feel, I mean, you kind of already said it felt seamless between the two. Like, obviously this is just is what would happen in the adventure in a way. But for Chris and Tone, like, same thing. The level of immersion, the level of realness and solidity to the story. What were your thoughts on that? Did it feel that way?
Well, I mean, I think like a lot, like we talked about, like living in the world, is that once you've gotten to 12th level there, Barovia had a substance to it. We'd been to the towns. We knew the people. There was a face on people. You knew who was in Vallaki and these other places. So you could play that. And then we started to branch out into the Feywild, but they all had a element of us living in it. So I thought it was very immersive in that way. Is that, like I think, you get to 12th level, you don't necessarily have to go off crazy there. You can continue to build on what you had, like you did there. And it was, because we never really left Barovia. We were constantly coming back, right? Like, I mean, we were going to Morganvo's Hole to Yester Hill to, all the different things there. So the finale itself, so I think in that way, it's, you created the module itself, and all of your work created an awesome world, and it helped us to live in it in a way that was very immersive. Long answer.
So with the expectations surrounding the published material, one of the nicest things I think Dave had with this is that he built a really solid foundation where the towns had a real feel to it. There was we could really explore these places really as little or as much as we wanted to. And we go to Barovia, you're expecting things. And I think you hit the check boxes with that. The gothic horror, the nightmarish aspects, the horrifying encounters in the middle of the night, all of that stuff. It wasn't flavored incorrectly. And so when we hit what do you want to do next? Yeah, you had a lot of room to work, and you kind of had a really good feel of what everybody else wanted to do even before we started doing it.
Kind of somewhat in that vein, I want to see from Scott and Matt in a way, a little more Scott because he was actually running as a player in the final thing. Matt, you were more the Monster Wrangler, but what your experience was, because I remember, Scott, you had said, and you guys will be hearing more about this because we have started our new Dragonlance campaign, the Shadow of the Dragon Queen, that Scott is now a part of, which is great. But Scott, you had said when you came in, you were in the penultimate session, and then you were in the finale episode as the Summer and Winter Knights. So you were playing NPCs, but you were a player character, and you invested them with a ridiculous personality that I would never have thought of as my own thing, but that's what's so fun about it. But having played in those two sessions, you were like, I want to be in your next campaign. Like, what types of things were you seeing in that short time that said, oh, because it was such a short, like, everyone else had been in the campaign for 2 years, but you saw this and said, oh, there's something here that I like. What did you like in terms of how the game ran or anything, and what didn't you like in that way, having stepped in super high level and for 2 games, right? Like a high overview of that. That makes sense.
Well, of course, I was playing mostly with people that I had already played with in the Woodstock campaign.
Sure.
For the most part. I mean, I like your DMing style. You really get into it very deeply, and with the voices and descriptions and all of that, and yet you let the players do their thing, but you keep them on track so that we don't go wandering off in digressions, and that impressed me quite a lot. And and obviously I had fun, as you say. I was running these two characters, and I decided I didn't want them just to be soulless automatons with swords that were just out there to inflict damage and take damage. So I gave them some personality, and you let me run with that, which I liked. I mean, you didn't say no, Scott, don't do that. Just go out there and fight, and so I made them brothers who were constantly each one trying to outdo the other one, sort of a Gimli and Legolas kind of rivalry you had there, and I had fun doing that, and you let me do it, and that made it a lot of fun for me.
That's what was so funny about it, is that my idea, and I kind of tried to get this out. My idea of the Feywild has always been from the Jim Butcher series, the Dresden Files. I think his Feywild is such a great immersive thing. So I really built it out. And the Summer and Winter Night are these like mantles of power that are like these very serious things. So I had this concept that they're like these serious, beings. And when you brought in this, they're these twins, and they are always they still have a sibling rivalry. To tell you the truth, I feel like that actually added a little bit of that whimsy that we were just talking about to a much more serious end of the world kind of encounter and climax there. So yeah, no, I love people kind of running with it on their own. Same thing, Matt, for you. So you had two abilities to jump in again, not in the way Scott did. Because you were behind the scenes with me. We would sit and I would have a general idea, like, this is my overall strategy. We might even pass some notes, things like that. Like, what did that feel like? That's not the question, because you already kind of answered that. But like, what worked for you? What didn't? And if somebody was going to ask someone to come in and be the Monster Wrangler, right? What do they need to know? Like, what's the quickest, most easy way to onboard somebody into that role without being like, hey, so here's a CR26 person, please play them, and it's 3 pages long.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I know, it really was.
So there's 2 pieces to that. One is, coming in, we did have pre-game meetings. Yeah, in essence, metagaming, a complete introduction to the monster, who they are. You gave me printouts.
Yeah.
So I literally was outfitted with character sheet. This is going to be the encounter. This is kind of how it's going to roll, but already, like, that I know that these things are flexible. And they can go awry very quickly. So in essence, like, here's maybe some backup plans. They might decide to do this. They might decide to do this. So that was really cool, because I was very prepared. There was because I'm coming in, I've never run anything high level like that.
Yeah.
Not even close. So being more unfamiliar with the campaign, like Scott coming in kind of fresh right at the end, that was nice, having a preparation. The other piece is, like Scott said, the ability to be able to run with it a little bit. You gave a template. This is kind of how this is going to run, but then here you go. And I was then making, in essence, executive decisions on...
Like when you pulled a gun on little one over dinner. Yeah. Escher.
Exactly. Right. Making executive decisions that, one, like, you had to fly with.
Sure.
Because I'm part of you, but, like, I didn't necessarily bring you up to speed
like,
on
as
what
Tony
I'm like.
says, live rounds.
Yeah,
right?
and I can be kind of volatile with my decisions all of a sudden. I'll just get sparked by something. So you gave that flexibility, which makes it fun. And then on a last piece, just overall, it's so nice to be able to come in to campaigns like this. I'm biased. I'm only experienced with your campaigns, Chris's campaigns.
Sure.
But Bonnie did DM one before, did an awesome one shot. But in essence,
The Halloween one where they were Jason.
Oh, that's right, the Dead
Yeah.
Fans Club. Oh, I totally forgot. Oh my god, yeah. Okay,
But-
yeah.
grateful to be able to play with characters as I would say high level as all of you, and as you all are very like Scott brought out with the voices. There's a lot of role playing, so it really brings everything up. And then you add in the scenery, like coming in on a finale like that. I feel like I was treated to rolling out to like the Emmys or something.
Oh, no,
the
it looked like
Grammys.
we were on YouTube or something, like we're acquisitions
Just
incorporated.
Yeah,
Role or something, right?
like Chris said in the beginning, it's one of those things. Like I've never felt that professional. That's like a professional Dungeons and Dragons scenario right there.
Yeah.
And I was able to run legendary characters
Yeah, absolutely.
with all kinds of abilities. So that I don't know if that answers.
No, I thought that was great. Now, because I really
Question.
feel like that is such a really great tool for DMs out there when you have these big things happening, to just hand somebody some of the people and they can run them much more effectively and much better than you would be able to, having to run 5 or 6 things at a time, plus run everyone else's combat. Absolutely. I think it's a wildly useful tool, and I was glad that you joined in on it. But like, before we get to like any kind of like final thoughts or anything like that, is there anything you guys are wondering about the campaign, or what you would have liked to see, kind of thing? Not, I mean, we'll get into some of that with the final thoughts, but anything that you want to know from me, from that side, like that you would have.
There's one thing.
Yeah.
The common kind of theme in it amongst here, even amongst from where does the campaign go, and story arcs and Monster Wranglers and people to help with terrain, is that being a DM can be an extremely time-consuming and stressful experience, especially with something as large as an epic campaign or a finale, and that there are people that can help, and that very often the players will tell you where you want to go from 12th on, right? Like they already have these ideas of what they want to do, things that they want to go, so you don't have to take it all on yourself, and you can get, you can meet someone like Scott who's amazing at terrain and an awesome role player, right? And you can let him roll with it, and he can add his own things, and it adds to the story itself. So you don't have to hold everything. You can get help. You can get Monster Wranglers and terrain and stuff, and concentrate on the parts that really help to make it what it is. Prepare what benefits the game or whatever. All credit to Mike Shea for that one. But
Oh yeah, Mike Shea, big time. Secrets and clues.
that was my big thing there. Sorry for the long answers there. But.
No, nothing. Anything else from any of you that were in it that were like any questions to my end, that things you were wondering about or would have liked to seen, or things of that nature? Anything?
For myself, I would say you were dazzling a little bit about my backstory. And although from a behind the scene perspective, I needed to kind of invest in it to truly know like what it is that I want to give versus how do I want to go, and you'll spark that interest on the side.
Mm-hmm.
But within game, I will sometimes lose that you're trying to get me to introduce something, and I don't know from a DM perspective without you flat out asking the player, like, hey, little one, do you want to share something with the group about this, versus a
Like
hint, and I'm not picking
what's
up on it.
a concrete example of it, so we can get a better for listeners, like something, and then I can kind of explain how I may or may not have been able to do that, or who knows.
So, for example, was the lost memory. Like, I know that we had talked about it, because I wanted that crystal, and so you worked into the game how to get that memory into the crystal by sacrificing one. But I wasn't prepared, I guess, in a sense, when you introduced the shopkeep and was like, oh, so
Yeah.
I remember you, and and then I didn't know where to take it because the rest of the players know Little One's very mysterious to begin with and has no idea mostly of her backstory in any way.
Yeah.
So as, on your side, when you tried to work that in, were you trying to get me to share more, or was it more of just a seed, and then as a DM, how does the player know if you truly want that to happen other than side texting?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the things why I was asking you guys that difference between the published portion of the beginning of the campaign and then this final one, because a lot of times I was feeling during the end game, they were great sessions, but a lot of it felt rushed. It felt on my end like I didn't set enough. Like Barovia, one, it's already there, right? The adventure already has built out towns and people and things, right? But it felt like, Chris, you had said earlier, it felt immersive. It felt like you had some ability to move your elbows in it, right? And kind of had some wiggle room. Where the other ones, you go to the Feywild. Now you're jumping to the Plane of Fire. Now you're going to the Four Cities. Now you're fighting Vampyr. Now you got to get this. Now you got to go get a MacGuffin. Now you got to fight Vampyr. And it was very much like it tracked, but it felt like you guys didn't have enough time. Like, for instance, Tony, when you had to go and melt down the swords to get the mage iron for Gondolin to craft this new sword. Like that whole part in the Plane of Fire portion, I had like the Four Cities idea. That's which I've talked about a little bit in some articles. That felt kind of like rushed. Like, okay, we did it. We did the thing. Now let's go. It didn't feel as much like, for me, narratively satisfying. Does that make sense for the end game stuff where it felt like there was like these points, boop, boop, boop?
Yeah, but you were trying to give a whole bunch of characters their options to go collect things, to do things.
Yeah.
And then you had very creative players that was able to figure out things really quickly at the same time.
That too, sure. Tony?
So, a little context with that. We had about 5 games going at the time. So, honestly, so our frequency of play was low. So we had to really try to maximize and squeeze and pack everything we could in every episode. That's why, I was grinding my teeth when people would be shopping. I'm like, no, we don't have time for this. We're not going to meet again for 5 weeks. And we're in the middle of a quest. I want to talk to this guy. He's interesting. That's great. He's got a side quest. And write it down. We'll be back.
That's a good point. Yeah. But yeah, I would say that felt, some of the endpoints, it felt a little more like I didn't have the time to devote to really do it, Whereas I think like we've been doing with Dragon Queen, I'm trying to build more of that in right from the get-go, more of that narrative stuff, even on the side, like we had talked about in the one episode, Tony, the article about, continuing story on outside of the game via text, email, whatever you're doing, Google Docs, to give that ability for narrative stuff that doesn't necessarily take up gameplay. And that would have been a great time with the endpoints of Curse of Strahd to build that out, I think, a little bit more. Because I definitely had the players for it. All of you guys were very, very focused in on the story and on your characters and what you wanted and what you were going for and all of that. So, all right. It's probably about that time. I think we could probably continue to talk about this damn thing for another couple hours. But how about some final thoughts? Whatever you kind of want to leave the listeners with. But one thing I would like to see from everybody, like what you loved best and what you loved worst, right? Like what you didn't like at all and would have changed, and what you did like that was whatever, and then whatever other, kind of final thoughts. And Tony and I will kind of wrap it up here. Beth, why don't we start with you?
Okay. I guess what I like the best is able to play, and I thought it was great having Scott come in, because I think it's really cool when you have in life people come in and go on different parts. So any long campaign, I think it'd be great for DMs to be able to add a player in for 1 or 2 rounds because it just, happened to be perfect timing for that.
Oh, like a palate cleanser. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Bit of cranberry.
Add new twist to life, and I guess the worst thing I hated was the fact that I didn't really know how to play cleric very well. And
I think you played cleric perfectly.
You did great.
But what you did was you came headlong into people's expectations of what a cleric is.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Which is definitely a thing out there, the heel bot mentality, and you played very against type for many levels. Yeah. Which I thought was fine. I thought it was absolutely fine. But yeah. Also having to learn a class like that as you were leveling up to really high levels, and the level of spells and things that are there, it can become overwhelming, especially if you're not playing, all the damn time for years and years and years. So.
Yeah.
Matt, what do you think? Final thoughts here. The Monster Wrangler extraordinaire.
Yeah, it was an original experience. I really never thought about playing monsters outside of being a DM, which I've never really done. So really original, really cool. Again, great because of all the actual players that were a part of it, all playing their parts to a T, like personalities, nuances, role playing, very heavy. The one really cool piece for each of those encounters was the dinner with the devil. The fact that it was actually a dinner party. Everyone showed up. They actually sat down and had a meal. It was depicted as a Barovian dish.
It was root vegetables and
yeah. And I was able to actually role play Rahadin out in a full-on way throughout the entire encounter that I just really enjoyed myself.
Yeah.
So being able to do that was really
he answered the door as Rahadin. That was
he did.
The master's servant. Yeah.
And I actually apologize, Matt. You were not in
Rahadin.
just 2. You also guest starred as a Monster Wrangler in the second Christmas game as well. You were playing some of the elves.
Oh, yes.
When they had to save Santa Claus from Vampyr's effects.
That's correct. Yeah. Again,
Okay,
I forgot that one myself.
I know, it just occurred to me.
And then the last one with Cerro Morte and Syriach, they were just legendary characters. So really cool in that respect. That was a big difference from the dinner with the devil. And then with the terrain and everything, again, just the full immersion. It was
anything that you were like,
great.
nah, don't like it. Wouldn't want to do that in my own game or deal with that in another game.
No, I can't really identify anything like that.
Okay. Well,
No.
I mean, that's fair. You were, you just hopped in as a kind of co-DMing kind of John.
Yeah.
So.
Overall, it was great. Everyone, I mean, you give space for everyone to do what they do. So some people talk more, some people talk less, some people role play more, some people role play less, and it was a great mix. So no,
Okay.
very flavorful.
I'll take that. All good stuff. I'll take that all day. Scott, what do you think? Final thoughts. What you loved, what you didn't, and anything else that you want to join in until we really deep dive into the terrain in upcoming episodes.
Well, there wasn't anything that I disliked or didn't love. I think actually Chris touched on this a little bit earlier. Was your willingness and ability to delegate things to make it work. I mean, I've met DMs in my long gaming life who were, for lack of a better word, control freaks, and they just had to run everything and for the most part it worked, but sometimes it maybe wouldn't. But here, I mean, you were putting on this, mammoth epic with a cast of thousands, and rather than try to run it all yourself, I mean, you delegated things, you had me build terrain and provide minis and then run a few NPCs, and you had Matt running the monsters, and that, your willingness and flexibility to do that is what made that whole thing work. I mean, if you tried to do the whole thing yourself. I mean, terrain apart, we've probably been there till like 4 a.m. Trying to resolve all the combats and stuff. And so, I just, my hat's off to you for, your ability to delegate and make use of other people's talents. And you're like the director of the movie, and you had all these other, the gaffers and the best boys and all these others that all combined to make the whole thing work. And so you orchestrated the whole thing beautifully, I thought.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, Thor used to say that all the time too. He would talk about like the soft skills of DMing and how, as much as you don't want to have to be the manager DM, there are times where those types of skills come into play. And I think that you just made that point, is that, you don't need to control everything, and delegating out, many hands makes light work. And I think that's something really, really useful for DMs to think about, in their own games if they're not already. Bon, what your final thoughts? What you loved, what you did not like, and never want to see again, and whatever final thoughts.
I never want to see cuteness die. Okay? Right. And I never want.
I blew that thing apart so many times.
I know, and I was so sad. And then it stopped me from playing for a while, and all my party members hated me for a hot second. But maybe not hate. That's a strong word. Honestly, within this campaign, I truly found how I like to play as a player.
Yeah, definitely.
And how I connect to the player in order to truly embrace it versus just feel like I'm just playing a game.
And also look forward to the game too, because you want to do things as that person. Yeah, definitely. Exactly. You definitely found that key for that role.
Yeah. And so with all her shenanigans, and honestly, this is the first game that I played with Tony. So this game was the intro for Tony, which is another reason why Little One kind of grabbed onto Hawk, because in my own personal self, I want to make sure people feel comfortable at the table, Mm-hmm. So it kind of like morphed into the BFF situation just because it was the first time I've ever met him, and let alone play with him. So, so it's a lot of positives and a lot of wonderful things. I absolutely love when Scott joined in the last 2 games that he brought Little One and Cuteness Mini. Oh, yeah. So it truly encompassed everything to full circle, because even though I had the pictures, like to see them.
Oh, no, we'll talk about it more, but just as a primer, so Scott had literally, so anybody who opens up the Monster Manual will go to Homunculus, and the little flying pot one, Scott had to literally kit bash something together by hand to make.
And it's perfect.
And he literally made it look like a damn homunculus.
Yeah. So, that was extremely exciting, especially for the first game back since Thorin had passed. So, having this amazing terrain as well as our miniatures to kind of bring forward, including Thorin's and Shannon's, which we were able to give. But then just the way that you brought honor to Shannon and Thorin for the exit of the game, even though it wasn't over. It was very beautiful. It was very touching. And it always felt like he still had a place in the game, even though they weren't there. So lots and lots and lots of positives. My only negative is don't kill cuteness in the future. Right?
So, Chris, I want to get you next. But real quick, for anybody out there listening, I know a lot of listeners big Critical Role fans, and I've been watching the Prime animated series, The Legend of Vox Machina. It occurred to me, we were watching it the other night, and so Hawk and Little One, everybody can understand the relationship, and it is the relationship between Grog, Strongjaw, and Pike, Trickfoot. The difference is flip the personalities. So Little One, riding on the shoulders, has the personality of Grog, and the big gigantic one has the personality of Pike. So it's fun. So if you watch that interplay, you will understand what we did for 35 sessions or more. So, Chris, what do you think? Final thoughts here. What you loved, didn't, and anything else?
All right. What I loved, Curse of Strahd campaign, USDM, being able to play a knight that ends up reforming an order and all this other things. Like, it was everything you'd kind of want out of a D&D campaign, like epic, like that way. And I think, as far as not like, I think kind of like Tony says a lot, like the amount of time, like it was, I mean, it was truly epic in scale too, which I think lends itself to a lot, but so many years, it takes so long to get there and stuff like that. And there's to keep to keep your interest going through the whole time. It's difficult. I thought you did a really good job, but I mean, the one thing I would say is it was long, right?
It was. It was. Yes, it was.
I'm like to get there right away, but I would say but I mean, it in a way it kind of served itself to be long. But I mean, that would be my only complaint, was that it was a massive campaign, but I mean, beautifully executed. So really
awesome.
Raw.
Tony, what do you think, buddy? Final thoughts.
Well, I gotta tell you, I loved the characters and the environment. That's what brought me to the table. Hawk is my favorite 5e character, and I love Erasmus, and I think that's saying something. And despite everything that happened, I was really gratified and happy we were able to bring the campaign to a close. Because in plenty of situations like that, everyone's been like, well, somebody, unfortunately, tragically passed, and we're all done. And then, here we are 2.5, almost 3 years into this, and we would have just, swept it under the rug and let it be a dusty book on the shelf we never got back to. So that was really fantastic, especially the way that it was closed. It was very satisfying and not cheapened in any way. The only thing I would have done differently is when we hit our conclusion, we sealed Vampyr, wrapped it up, and it was a fade to black, kind of like the Sopranos end.
Yeah.
So, we won, but then, I mean, it ended, really, I mean, of course, you're probably exhausted. You're like, oh, right on it, Matt. You're like, yeah. Oh, but I would have, circled back and maybe gonna throw some emails out or something to that effect. It was a long session, but hey, big end, Scar, you went and did this. They put it in a group once we could all see it. Look at the credits rolling, and the brother knights went off and did this. And maybe little one found that unicorn she always wanted, and Fenris never gave up the search for baby Walter, so forth and so on.
Yeah, no, definitely a nice epilogue would have been kind of fun too. It's some of those things, right?
Well, I took it as that just allows that for future.
That too, absolutely, yeah. I kind of got the sense that a lot of these characters, they're so in the world now that they're gonna come back out in some of our All-Star games. So
the campaign's not done.
The campaign's never done, yeah. So my final thoughts, as I said in our initial wrap up, this was my favorite campaign so far. We will see what happens with Dragonlance, though, because that's turning out pretty awesome with this group again. But favorite campaign, because I was really able to begin to really hone what my style is and what I want out of gameplay, while also being challenged on adjusting to some of those things. The second half of it, there were definitely some things I would have changed. As I said, I would have loved a little more immersion, a little more of the world feeling real, especially in these outer planes and in the Feywild and all this kind of stuff. But, as Tony said, frequency of play does it. I will say on a note, too, I mean, we obviously started the episode with it. I will say as simple as it might seem, or as it doesn't matter, when you game long enough, I think you'll all understand it. But the last game that we had in the Feywild at the Court of Stars was Thorin's last game in Curse of Strahd, and I was able to. It just worked out that it was his conclusion, his story arc conclusion, and things in the game happened that just. I remember him saying it was a really fun game. He was really happy that he could do some of these things, and I thought that was a nice bow. It was a small bow in the grand scheme of things, but it was a nice bow because when you game long enough, the connections that are forged with that. So anyway, we're going to be back talking about this stuff a lot more. It's probably not the last time you're going to hear about Curse of Strahd, because we're going to have plenty of examples when you guys send in your questions to us. So, the phone lines are back open. Again, thank you to every single one of you out there for everything that you did and for giving us the time. So we can't wait to be back. It's going to be a little bit here and there. We're going to have some special guests on, things of that nature as we kind of work out next chapter of Three Wise DMs. And with that, I'm going to let Tony and I's erstwhile leader take us out.
And to all of you listening at home, thank you very much for listening to another extra long episode, an extra special episode of Three Wise DMs. Now, this didn't come from a listener question, but you may have questions that come out of this. If you do, please feel free to send them in to us. You can send them in to threewisedms@gmail.com. You can go to our website, put them in the What's Your Problem field, or you can talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're active in all those places. And really, the point of this podcast is to help you, to help other DMs with their problems. So if there's anything we can help you solve or help you talk through, we'd love to hear what you'd like to hear us talk about. Yeah, if you like what you're listening to, please hit the 5-star rating button in your podcast platform. That really helps us get more exposure, helps more people find us, and we just appreciate that support. And yeah, if you want to share it or recommend us to friends, we would love that too. That's it for this week. We'll talk to you next time on Three Wise DMs.